Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
And this episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market IT services companies. Most IT marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Condor helps you measure and generate a qualified pipeline, make the most with your budget, and finally be recognized as a revenue driver and not just a cost center. You can learn more at condoragency.com. Today, for today's episode, we have with us Wade Poezyn. Wade, welcome, Wade. He is a marketing leader with over a decade of experience driving growth and innovation, and in particular, focusing in demand generation, a function that he currently leads at Transact Campus. That's an educational technology company. And he also is a podcast host. He has the Underdog Rising podcast, where he helps the younger generation advance in their careers. So really excited to have you, Wade, and so welcome. And can you please expand on that introduction?
Awesome. Thank you, Carlos. I'm glad to be here. Yeah. So, I've had ample experience within higher education, as you mentioned, but also prior to that, I was involved in transportation services, where that was corporate commuter and also B2C with individual charter services, as well as loyalty and SaaS software in a company called Hap Mobile, which kind of just, drove small business loyalty programs and campaigns along those lines, still within the demand generation realm. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah, and I think that's what's most challenging for marketing teams. I'm referring in particular to the demand generation side. I think marketing as a support to operations, there's a little less pressure, but to generate demand when the company heavily relies on marketing to drive growth, that's when you need to know what you're doing, and when you have the eyes of the C-suite measuring for that, right? So before getting into the details of that function of marketing, tell us a little bit what type of demand generation initiatives you've done, you've seen are more successful, and then we'll get into the data-driven side of it and the positioning. But in general, what areas have you had success with?
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that a lot of companies will mention about demand generation is that they isolate it to a department versus knowing that it's an overall strategy, right? So just like you have ABM and other initiatives, demand generation is overall strategy versus isolating it to a department with some folks. But obviously you see in companies this day and age where they have demand gen teams and ABM teams, and they kind of work together cohesively. So a lot of the campaigns we have run, obviously going back in my career with transportation, we would run segmented campaigns targeting B2C as well as B2B. Sometimes there would be some crossover because, like I mentioned before, there would be charter services as well as corporate commuter transportation, right? Which is more along B2B and targeting the companies like LinkedIn, Gilead, et cetera, for, commuter transportation. So picking up their employees from certain points in where jurisdictions where their employees would live, and then bringing them to campus to work, and then obviously back. So, we saw a lot of success by running individual targeted campaigns. So back then that was more of an ABM play. And then now currently within Transact Campus, what we do with demand gen is more of a holistic play, right? So we focus on the full funnel foundation campaigns, in a sense, as if some people will call it always on and always running, right? But we don't like to isolate any one effort or channel because they all work cohesively together. And we've seen a lot of success that way because we can have multiple touch points with different pieces of content targeting different audiences, right? But when you look at our product set, there's multiple products within each business pillar that we have. So structuring multiple different campaigns that are always on to different audiences with the different products, we've always seen success that way.
Yeah, and let's help illustrate what would happen if you don't do it that way, right? If you do it siloed, right? And if you don't collaborate with others, I mean, one example is, okay, you're not gonna have enough probably interesting content, right? So you could have great targeting and you could have the greatest workflows running, but if you don't put interesting content, if you don't add value, then it won't work. So that right then and there, right? That's an example. I don't know if you have seen how not to do it before.
Yeah, right. And I think you touched on a great point is don't put them in a silo, because if you look and you're doing paid ads, okay, paid ads don't work for every organization. You have to look at your infrastructure and see if holistically together, if that key component is helping drive revenue and helping drive, conversion rates, great, keep it going. But I think oftentimes folks will look at it in isolation and they say, okay, is this channel providing a direct ROI? No, it's not. Okay, you don't have budget for it, or cancel it or let it go, right? And it can be okay at times if it fits in with your overall marketing strategy and your results that you're trying to drive. But you need to look at it holistically. How does paid ads drive and fit into your overall, strategy or campaign? Is it top of funnel where you're driving awareness, or maybe perhaps do you do some retargeting once you've done some organic SEO strategies to get people to come in based off of that content, and then you retarget them with some ads based on what they're interested in, and then does that increase your conversion rates, right? So I think over time you've always got to lean into the data and then test, restructure, analyze. And that's the fun part, I think, about marketing, right? It's like almost like a puzzle. You've got to find the different pieces. Does this one fit in here? Yes, it does. Oh, this one doesn't go over here because X, Y, and Z don't match. And I think that's the importance and the fun of it. You've always got to test and identify what works for that specific organization and does it drive results.
No, I agree. I think you often hear, well, paid ads is not for every company, as you mentioned, and that is true. I also think that if a company is at a certain point, digital marketing maturity and size, especially an investment in the marketing department, they have to be doing some type of paid ads, right? And I'm not saying you have to spend $100,000 a month, in Google Ads, right? But if you have a marketing team of a relative size, you're probably, for example, creating videos, right? And in creating a video, with the time that you're putting into editing it, creating it, the experts, the editing, and you're putting it out, it's probably costing you at least a few $100s, if not thousands, right? And then you're just gonna put it on the organic post on your LinkedIn or whatever. It's gonna get 20 views, so you pay $2,000 to get 20 views. If you just boost it, then it completely makes sense. And then, as you mentioned, right, I think remarketing, it's underrated strategy in general, especially to put enough thought on what content pieces to show to who. But yeah, that's what, again, it can be too early, or it can, or if you turn it on, and if you don't have either enough patience, or most importantly, an integrated strategy with the other efforts, then it's not going to probably be very effective, and you might be tempted to turn it off, and then it's going to be really hard to turn it back on.
Yeah, right. And I think there's also, when you look at like conversion rate optimization, right? It's kind of, yes, the channel or the funnel still kind of works to some degree because the person is going on a journey. Yes, has that journey changed and it's kind of all over the place and each person goes along their own path or journey, it's themselves, of course. But, you still have to look like, do I put an intense focus on top of funnel, middle, or sort of bottom? And the reason why I bring that up in that kind of structure is there's more decision making as they go along their journey, right? Because in the beginning, you just pique an interest, then they've got to actually decide, and then you're giving them that data that is relevant to their pain points, because they ultimately have to decide and sell themselves on the fact that the value that you are delivering in your product far outweighs the cost that they are going to spend, right? And that's where you often see at times, with cart abandonments, or when a lot of people go to unsubscribe from organizations, that at that point where the value that is being delivered in the user's perspective goes below the cost of what they're paying for the platform, that's where you see unsubscribes occur, right? And then that's where revenue will drop over time. So people always should focus on the value. And just going back to conversion rate optimization, is focus on that end portion, right? Like, are you testing those landing pages to see what resonates? Like, is it really resonating with IT folks, or does it not? And then try and have discovery calls with IT folks to see what pain points they deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then answer those on that landing page to help convert them a little bit more. And I think you see that over time, and it does take testing, but you do see some good results.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, we manage paid media for a lot of clients. And, a lot of times they believe that just start running ads is going to save their business, right? Or is going to generate growth overnight. And, not necessarily, right? You could have usually when a company is already established, the business model works. It might be a tough industry, it might be an industry that's not growing anymore, but the business model is working, is making money, right? But if you're a startup, maybe the problem isn't the business model, right? In your offer, you're not offering enough value, for example. Or it could be that you're offering now, whether you're a startup or an established company, that you're offering it to the wrong person, right? You're not finding your target audience. Or you could have a great product and finding your target audience, but the messaging is not there, right? You don't know how to communicate that, right? So I think you were referring to that, and I know you have experience again, in crafting effective messages, right, for the demand generation channels. But any advice on, because a lot of times, I think again, either the owner or in our case, the client, sometimes the problem could be, you could be bad at managing paid media. I'm not saying there are not bad agencies there, but it's usually, one of the three, you can have the best agency in the world, right? And ideally, they will help you either find the target audience, but it's much harder to help them with the messaging because they're not your company, right? You know your company better than anyone, right? So yeah, any advice there on how to on the messaging challenge?
Yeah, I think, it all comes down to sort of that brand positioning, right? And I think sometimes there might be industries where you have to target different audiences based on the products that you're delivering to market. But I think when we focus specifically on like IT folks, right, you have to talk to what they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, right? So many times we see this, and other people will mention it online as well, but a lot of companies tend to sell their products. And yes, at some point in time that does have to happen, but you have to focus on like telling that story, right? If that IT person is going through a struggle on a day-to-day basis because they're hitting a bottleneck or a roadblock due to not having, this product that will streamline their day-to-day efforts, you have to talk to that, right? Understand their pain points and what they're experiencing by having those discovery calls, like I mentioned earlier, right? You don't have to specifically interview your prospects, but go back to your existing clients that you do have on board, talk to them, walk them through certain questions to see where they are coming from, and then alter and adjust your messaging, obviously within the story that you're trying to tell, and fit it in at that correct point in time. And you'll see that over time, right? Because you can look back into the data and see, are you getting sort of, even going back old school, right, on spike models on your data? Are you seeing spikes where your people are where the content is resonating with those folks you're trying to target. And sometimes you might have to shift that content, right? You might have to, this one we put at the beginning, it's not really speaking to them now. It's not convincing them, but it's, for some reason, it's selling them, right? Sort of on that conversion point, and maybe let's shift it there. So you just got to kind of always test, but I think you've got to lead with the why behind your brand. How is your brand going to bring value? Once again, going back to that, your value has to far supersede the cost that you're selling your product at, just to get that deeper connection with your audience, right? Because it ultimately becomes a partnership at the end of the day. Yes, we're all selling and we're trying to do business together, but it's that partnership and a united effort that, it's that age-old saying, right? You want to go far, go alone. You want to go you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what organizations need to do, right? We're here to uplift you so that you can be successful in what you do at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And has that been a challenge? Like how much have you had to get into the details of positioning to drive a successful demand generation function?
Yeah, so I think it's, if you have the opportunity to have a product marketing team in your organization as well as a marketing team, there can be a really wonderful synergy there, because you can have conversations with them, right? They're immensely focused on the product knowledge and the features and functionalities. Yes, there's a lot of jargon, right? But how can we ultimately take that jargon and put it in relatable terminology when we go to market? So I think that does help. But I think if you don't, I think you as an individual, as a demand gen person, you need to understand the product really well before you go to massage that copy to sell somebody to bring in pipeline for the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the audience a lot of times. Well, yeah, one thing is the product. Then a lot of companies have multiple services, and then each service is for a different audience. So it's definitely challenging. It's challenging, I think, and a lot of times the marketing person is, relatively new, and maybe they had experience in that industry, maybe they don't. And I think a lot of times it's overlooked. It's like, well, I mean, this is what they've always said, and it kind of gets a little either lost in translation, or you never update it, as you mentioned, right? If you don't have a product marketing team, it's more likely that you haven't updated your messaging to the particular audiences of your services. So that's something that somebody has to raise their hand, either the demand generation team, the design team, somebody needs to be, the content team obviously should be the number one that should be doing it. But a lot of times, you'd be surprised how many times that nobody does it.
No, you are right. And I think there's a saying that I believe it was from like Alex Hormozy, and he talks about, I think it goes something like this: the goal of great writing is for the reader to understand, but the goal of great copy is for the prospect to feel understood, right? And I think like that speaks volumes, because yes, you're writing and people have to understand it, but are they being understood with what they are currently going through? And I think I think it's just such a really wonderful saying. And I heard it, like, I think a couple months ago, and it just really resonated with me.
Wow, yeah, that's I hadn't heard that one before, but it immediately clicks. I think and I struggle a lot with that, right? It's also not easy to write great copy, right? But I think a lot of times the people that are not either naturally great copywriters, which is, I don't know if that's even possible to be, right? You need to, it's a skill that you definitely need to work on.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you are not a professional copywriter, an experienced copywriter, you could be a great marketer, a very competent marketer, a person that takes your job very seriously, and you don't see it, right? So you focus your writing on, okay, this makes sense. I explained the product, as you mentioned, right? The reader will understand it, right?
Right.
But not necessarily the reader will feel understood. So I love that. I'm going to start using it more,
Yeah, definitely.
work with our team in creating copy, because even for us, we're a marketing agency, and still a challenge for us, to put great copy out there.
Yeah, and I think, you folks are very talented in that sense, right? Because you're not only, some marketers are very um incorporated into their business, right? That's what they know, that's all they know, and they really can spend time understanding that product. And you guys have a very special talent, right? Where you're able to help multiple people in, IT services, et cetera. But you understand that industry so well that if people come to you, you're able to help them market their services, because at the core of it all, you guys have the ability to adapt because you know that industry so well. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that because you guys do a really great job at that.
Thanks, Wade. And another angle or factor that can make or break a campaign, obviously, is if you're learning from it, and how are you analyzing the performance of it. What's usually your philosophy, and how to measure it, and exactly how to be data driven when generating demand?
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned before, I think there's a lot of you have to look at the data. There's multiple different tools out there, right? Where, and you see this online as well, that there's a lot of tools that will speak to different points of attribution, right? Is it last touch? Is it first touch, et cetera? And I think, we don't there's multiple touch points along the way, right? And that has increased yearly, right? It's just gone from, 5 to 14 to, I think now it's like 30 or 50, but you have to stay top of mind, right? And you see it really well with those organizations like Coke and Nike, where they've built that brand up over time. And when you think of one product, you think of them first. And I think that that is very beneficial because they've done a good job at just being top of mind. And that is done by looking at the data, right? Where do we need to insert ourselves based on demographics, firmographics? Let's look at the data sets from multiple different points, right? I know everybody always goes, we got to have one single source of truth. We've got to have one single source of truth. But if you just isolate that to a HubSpot, a Google Analytics, or an SEMrush, or a Hotjar, or whatever the different platforms are that you use, you are then in itself isolating your campaign, right? Because different platforms will give you different measurements on different things, right? One's going to be traffic, one will be which piece of content is working. So I think overall, you just have to look at the numbers and uncover the patterns and behaviors that will help guide your next steps, right? So that's where I would focus on. And then obviously, ultimately, at the end of the day, marketing is there to support sales and the business's pipeline. So you got to identify what works and drive for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times, and I think I have it here. Yeah, this is one of my favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, this is the guy that he started as a baseball analyst in the Moneyball era.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then he got into politics, and he predicted the 50 states correctly. I think it was in the 2016 presidential election.
No way.
And then he wrote this book. He just released a new one that he just published it a couple of weeks ago. It's called Inside the Edge. It's more about risk taking. But yeah, one of my favorite authors, and I also because of the background in sports and data. But going back to how to apply it to marketing in terms of finding what's the signal and what's the noise. You can either have the wrong metrics, which is common. For example, right, in demand, and not that you shouldn't look at top funnel metrics, because otherwise you're never gonna get those people to bottom funnel. But ultimately, you cannot measure the success of the marketing function in terms of social media engagements, for example, or website visits. But I think so. For example, website visits, sorry, that's a good one, right? You want to have website visits, but for example, I remember a guy that was, working in our website. He looked at Google and said, great, the website visits are up, we keep going up. And obviously we were putting a lot of effort in our recruiting, and we were sending a lot of recruiting. So all of the visits were coming from Latin America, and our clients are in the US. So it's like, okay, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's bad that we have more visits and great that people want to work at our company, but that's not going to find us more clients, right? So let's start looking at the right visits in Google. And even then, it gets trickier. In SEO, for example, a common mistake is that you see overall organic traffic, and that's an indicator, but ultimately you want to see what are the keywords that are either core to the business, or if they are top funnel keywords, that at least you have some control on how you are moving those people that first got to the website for educational content, you are successfully driving them down the funnel. Because if you're not, then you might as well just focus on content for more middle or bottom funnel keywords. So it's everybody says they are data driven, everybody wants to be data driven. I don't think there's a single marketer today that will tell you that data is not important, but very few, will have the know-how of analyzing that data and finding really the important signals to make decisions. Is what we've seen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And then it's also, how do you dissect that data and then tell that story, right? To folks that maybe don't understand marketing as much as we do, right? Especially from an agency perspective, if you're getting clients coming in, how do you help them, once again, understand what you're doing, but it also might not show direct impact in a month, right? And that's the thing I always like to bring across to people, especially when you're, working with different organizations, as you guys probably do within your agency, is that it takes time. Just like anything good in life, it takes time. You've got to understand the data. You've got to try something. Is it working? Is it bringing in the traffic? Okay. Is that traffic the correct traffic or not? If it is, now what's the next step? Then you got to go through that whole journey. And if you start with 1,000, then you have a drop off to, 200, and then to convert, right? Is that money that you're spending worth that conversion? But it takes time. Just because maybe the first month you brought in 2 based off that example doesn't mean that in month 3 you're still going to be at 2. You're going to learn, you're going to pivot, and you'll adjust. And that's very important for clients and organizations to understand. But I think for marketers, we also have to do a good job at storytelling the data. So once again, just like we're trying to get a client to come on board, we're selling executives to understand and make them feel understood. Because at the end of the day, it is all about numbers. Are we driving pipeline? Is the business growing? Are we meeting company goals, et cetera? So,
and Wade, I referred to SEO as an example of the data, and before we started recording, we were talking about that a little bit. I wanted you to explain to the audience the Spiderweb pillar model that you referred to, and why you believe in that, and in general, any other advice that you have from on that front.
Yeah, definitely. So it's just a different take. Obviously, it's still SEO. It's just not looking at it once again in sort of a funnel framework. You go this piece of content and then to this one, then to the next, right? That ultimately converts somebody. But it's a spiderweb network. Just so that if, for example, right, you have your sort of core topic, right? So you think of it like building a network, okay, of like interconnected content where your main pillar pages, it could be if you're focusing on, IT services or paid ads or whatever it might be, that becomes your main pillar page. And that is your core hub, right? Where ultimately you want most of the traffic to go to. And then surrounding that is all of the spider web related content, because the entry point for each individual is drastically different, right? You might find, I don't know, shoes differently than I'm searching for shoes, right? I might be looking for some boat shoes. You're looking for some Nike kicks, right? So you've kind of got to formulate that to answer a lot of the questions. So you start with your pillar content, then you'll have sub pillar content, which will be your different products and features. And then ultimately from there, you'll expand out to articles or blogs that will answer more of the questions that people are searching online. So you're taking that user on a journey, right? You're meeting them where they are by creating that specific content on that topic. Where if somebody's like, I'm looking for men's boat shoes, then they'll read an article, then you interlink back to your sub pillar content on, why boat shoes are beneficial for men. Then they'll read that article. Now your time on site increases drastically because you're keeping the user on your site because you answered their question that they were searching for on Google. And then you're taking them to the next step, right? And then ultimately within that sub pillar content, you're internally linking to your main pillar content. So there's a lot more strategies that I can go into with it, where you will write articles on your specific content pages that will ultimately drive traffic, and you'll rank higher for keywords really, really quickly on Google because it will index it over time. And it's beneficial if you take some time to build all of it out and then upload it within a span of like 3 to 5 weeks. And then Google will just index it and crawl it. And you'll see a lot of your traffic will increase because you're answering those questions that people are searching for online and then driving them ultimately to your points of conversion.
And do you think that most companies don't have this approach, or do you think that they do know, that content pillars and the spider model is the way to go, but they simply haven't been able to do it successfully?
Yeah, I think some people get there through creating pieces of content, right? I think they will say, yes, okay, we need to talk about IT services, right? But then they might do maybe a infographic or a white paper on the 5 top reasons, why you need to focus on something around IT. And then they might do a blog, but they don't interconnect the pieces across their website with that internal linking. And that's where that spider model comes in, right? But then there's also an amount of words that you need to put for each article so that you help the pages rank a little bit better. There's a company actually called Demand Jump that explains and goes through a lot of this. They've done a really good job at getting it across. But I think a lot of companies need to shift into that framework. Now, it does take time and it does take resources. And obviously, that's where some companies might get impacted and they just want to, it's more about being proactive than reactive, right? Taking that time to build out that content, have that structure in place so that you can know, okay, this blog, I got to interlink to that article and then interlink to this piece, versus when you're creating pieces individually, you're not seeing the whole big picture come together, right? You're creating it, you're putting it online, you're monitoring that asset, and that's it. And you're not helping support all the other pages on your website.
No, and I've seen both. I've seen companies that, as you mentioned, right, they might have a great content engine working and pumping out, a few content pieces each month. But again, it's not, they don't have the spider they haven't drawn the spider, not even in their head, not even in a board or anything, right? And then I also see the opposite, right? Some companies have that drawing, but then that drawing stays forever in their head or in
no execution,
board, right? So there's no, the interlinking doesn't happen, So I've seen it go both ways.
Yeah, I think, if you can keep track of it on wherever, Notion, Excel, Wrike, whatever platforms people use, I think that's in level of importance, right? If you don't have the infrastructure to go out and create all the pieces of content and then have a plan to interlink and when you're going to launch and what date is it going to go up online, track it, right? If you have this piece of content, identify what it is, what some beneficial topics would be. And then as you go down and you create this blog or this article or this white paper, and if it all lives on your website, go back and look. Oh, I have this, right? 5 things to help IT folks streamline their workday. Can that interlink anywhere on our website that currently exists? And just keeping track of that, I think over time, because you always hear, right? So many people create pieces of content and it just falls by the wayside. They don't go back and look at the pieces of content they've created. How can I repurpose, recycle, and use that back in market? I think that's where some companies and organizations will fall apart. But I think if you keep track of it slowly but surely, you can build that out and you'll see that traffic increase.
How big of an opportunity do you think it is to also, once you have the model, the spider model, let's say, not only established, but then you put out enough content that it's actually a spider, that the spider model becomes a real spider in interconnected one, right? After that happens, like, how important is it to start? Would you worry about continuing adding, let's say, modules to the spider web, or is it more important to then start updating each of the content pieces so they remain current or
relevant? Yeah, you are correct. So I think, initially, if you have the resources to move at a faster speed, I would look at what you have existing, write it all down on an Excel spreadsheet or wherever, see how you can currently interlink if they are not interlinked already to kind of take that user along that journey. Then identify what pieces of content you could expand upon to support what you have existing to get to more of that spider web. And then if you have to, go back and then update those pieces of content if they are not evergreen to stay relevant in those times. So yeah, if you don't have the resources, it is a challenge because everybody wants to go to market like right now, right? So the Spiderweb model, to see a drastic increase, it does take a lot of resources to build everything out. Let's wait. Let's play the long game. Okay, now we're going to upload everything in a short time frame to see drastic change in a short amount of time. But a lot of companies, I mean, we're all busy, right? So it's hard to kind of get to that. So sometimes we have to take the slower road, but then the results are going to happen slower.
So let's say let's say your spiderweb model, let's say it's you draw it up to be around, let's say, 15 content pieces, right? You recommend accumulating all of those and then launching them in a short period versus, for example, doing 3 a month for 5 months?
I would, because as you start uploading them, Google's obviously going to index them and crawl them, right? But if you do that you take the time to wait and then you deliver it, not all on the same day, but over a span of a few weeks, Google's going to look at you as a very authoritative site, right? And then it's going to recommend you even more, right? And when you start looking at how AI is incorporating into all of the SERP structure, that plays a big part as well, right? So you've also got to make sure that you're answering a lot of the questions that people are searching for on Google, right? And you can find that through, platforms like SEMrush or Ahrefs or, those kinds of platforms. So it takes time to do a little bit of digging, but I'd recommend, if you can and you have the time, pause, create the content, and then upload it.
Yeah.
Because you'll find yourself, specifically if you target the keywords you want to rank for, you'll find yourself ranking higher on the first page of Google by implementing that structure.
Mm-hmm. And since we got into nerdy SEO topics, I might as well just ask another question that I think is relevant these days, which is a lot of people, have a fear, and I include myself in that, of how the world, Google is being or will be cannibalized. I'm not saying it's going to die, right? But it's definitely being cannibalized by, ChatGPT, right? Or in the future, who knows what else will come up. I don't know, I'm not gonna say 90%, but I would estimate at least 50% less searches on Google today than I did 2 years ago, because I like ChatGPT much better, right? So how much of that are you seeing, and any trends or advice that you recommend so that people and companies adapt quick to that? Because a lot of people are depending on organic traffic or, for that matter, paid search.
Yeah, no, you're starting to see that, and I think I can't remember his last name, but the CEO of Toriel, which is an interactive demo company, he did a post on LinkedIn a while back around how companies need to start looking at optimizing their content for AI, because more and more folks are leaning away from Google and going to ChatGPT to ask those questions, right? And then that will give them their answer. So I think it does pose a little challenge there, So I think we always have to be on our toes and staying on top of market trends to see what is coming out. Don't wait till the last minute. And don't wait for the news basically to tell you what's going to take place. Go out, do your research, make sure you're kind of ahead of when things are going to launch, right? Because companies will give away sneak peeks of what is about to come to market. I know OpenAI doesn't at times, but yeah, I think you have to be strategic around that, but it still is a very, very new landscape, and I know sometimes we also have to be conscious of how we use AI in how we're selling our products and services and creating our content, because a lot of it, now that it's so readily available and so many people use it, it's it kind of repeats similar information, right? And I think a lot of people can see that when they go to enter their prompts. Obviously, you're going to customize your prompt, but there's sort of a style and a manner, unless you really spend time crafting your AI prompts, that it tends to, you could call out that it's AI. So I think that, it's still very beneficial to leverage copywriters, right? Maybe utilize it as a starting point, but then have people who are great at crafting messaging come in and look at it, because to that one point again, right? Your clients have to feel like they are understood, and I don't know if AI gets that just yet.
100% agree. Another reason why it's even more important to be a great copywriter, and also to keep it short. It's hard. It's hard to convey what you want to convey, and that the person feels understood in a short message, right? And to
Yeah,
balance that
very.
out. And I agree. I think ChatGPT or AI in general, they're really good explaining something that people can understand. But again, unless you give them 50 great prompts and follow-ups, I don't think they're going to come up with a great headline, that
Yeah.
the person that is both a great copywriter and really knows the business could come up with, and even more with the help of ChatGPT, but ultimately fueling them
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Wade, you mentioned, what was the website that you mentioned for jump stuff, for the SEO?
Oh yeah, it's called Demand Jump.
Demand jump. Okay.
Yeah.
I always like to ask any references, platforms, publishers, tools, books that you recommend for people, whether in the SEO, I mean, mostly related to the topics that we discussed, or if we missed anything, or if you have another good one, obviously that one too.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people will know most of the platforms. I mean, obviously, Demand Jump is great. When we're just looking at general platforms to utilize, I think Miro is a great platform. It's really a powerful tool just to sort of, map out frameworks and structures and just kind of to flesh out your idea. And then, I think there's so many different platforms where you can leverage AI this day and age to either create ads or create wireframes for landing pages. And I think it's really important to go out and test out multiple different platforms, so that way AI can give you ideas, and then you can take that and implement it into your marketing initiatives and go to market with it. There is a really great company that I enjoy. The CEO is Sahil Patel, and he runs a company called Spiralize, which focuses on conversion rate optimization. And it's very, very fascinating to look at the different changes that they do from, one landing page to another. And you can see, because they scrape over 30,000 different sites to understand which landing pages perform the best and drive the highest conversion rate. So always a good one to look into. Mention my name if you reach out to Sahil, and I'm sure we can all work something out there, So yeah.
Will do, Wade. Thank you. Anything else that I didn't ask do you think would be worth sharing?
Not anything related to marketing. I just think, a piece of sort of just motivation. I think I always say this to people I work with in organizations. It's not what you look at, it's what you see, right? And I think some people feel threatened by maybe AI and all these shifts in the market. And a lot of things will happen in organizations. So yeah, you just want to, mention to people, stay motivated. Don't worry. You are great at what you do. Have confidence within yourself, and you guys will be completely safe when you're, changing organizations or doing your job within marketing.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for being with us, Wade. And if you guys want to check out his podcast, the name is The Underdog Rising. It's available on all the podcasting platforms. So again, thanks for being here, Wade.
Hey, Carlos, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.